What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about this Vox video on how you're watching Fox News, but you just don't know it. Real quick, I'm sure some of you have already noticed that there's a quick format change. This is mostly an audio video with images, stills, and videos. I know I usually appear on camera, but due to reasons I will not disclose, like this room being incredibly hot when I set up all my lights at the tail end of May, I will be going with the audio and PNG avatar for this video. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below, if you like it, hate it, yada yada yada, but let's get into this Vox video.
I'm done. I'm finally done watching Fox News. It's rotting my brain, and only boomers watch that crap anyway. From now on, I'm watching real news, stuff that actually matters. And I'll never have to worry about Fox News ever again.
Two of the headlines on Fox News tonight.
Oh God, it's everywhere. There's no escape.
So right off the bat, I do have to acknowledge that the comedy in this video is just terrible. I mean, it's bad enough that a left-wing propaganda outlet like Vox is making a video calling for censorship and gatekeeping against Fox, because according to Vox, Fox is a right-wing propaganda outlet, but this video is also full of moments where you have to pause and cringe because that was an actual attempt at comedy in order to make this video more entertaining.
In an ideal world, political journalism looks like this. On either side, you've got the parties, fighting for the attention of the press. And in the middle, you've got journalists, sorting through what's important and what's just partisan bullshit. This is called gatekeeping, and it's one of the most important things journalists do.
So already I have major issues with this. In an ideal world, this is how the news media would work. The role of a journalist should not be a gatekeeping role, which is what Vox idealizes. Journalists shouldn't be picking between right-wing and left-wing talking points and determining what's news. Journalists should seek out their own stories absent partisan interests and report what's true.
Political operatives can spin whatever talking points they want, but ultimately it's the journalists who decide what's newsworthy enough to pay attention to. But that is in an ideal world, and we don't live in an ideal world, we live in hell.
I also find it really funny that in this ideal picture of how the news will work, the left is pitching two stories, Russia and healthcare, and the journalist, the arbiter of what we should hear about, picks healthcare instead of Russia, which for the past 3 years has not been what's happening. And when he turns to the right wing and the options are death panels, which is related to healthcare, and immigration, he doesn't pick anything from the right wing side. So if the title and the rest of this video don't convince you that Vox's ideal world is one where the conservatives don't have any access to mainstream media and they can't get their message out, this illustrates it beautifully, whether intentionally or not. Immigration is a legitimate issue, but it should be refused in this ideal world because conservatives are concerned about it and therefore it's not news. So let's set aside for a second that in the ideal world that they pitch, there's no opposing viewpoints, and let's move into what they're actually talking about and why our world is messed up. Spoiler alert, it's because Fox News exists.
And in hell, there's Fox News. Fox exists in this weird in-between space because it claims to be a news organization, but it's essentially a Republican front group. The network was founded by GOP political operative Roger Ailes. Ailes spent his career advising Republican presidents like Reagan, Bush Sr., and surprise, surprise, Nixon. A memo from the Nixon Library detailed Ailes' dream of launching a Republican news network, a plan for putting the GOP on TV news, which was described as a way to get around the, quote, prejudices of network news selectors.
Now this is pretty much true. Fox was founded by Roger Ailes. Roger Ailes is a Republican operative, and the entire purpose of Fox News is to overcome the selection bias of the mainstream left-wing media by creating a path for Republicans to get their message out. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of Fox News. I don't watch any cable news shows outside of clips on the internet or occasionally in situations where CNN just happens to be on in the place that I'm at and I can't leave. But I think there's an important distinction that needs to be made between a Fox News, and I'll throw MSNBC in there just for the sake of it, and other media outlets like CNN, NBC, ABC, and, CBS. And the distinction is when you're watching Fox News, you pretty much know that you're watching something that favors Republicans, the GOP, and the conservative agenda. The same is true for MSNBC to a certain extent. They have these campaigns like Lean Forward and all these things to indicate that they are in fact on the left. Where you run into trouble is where you have a CNN or an NBC or CBS pretend that they're objective journalists when they're just as left-wing as MSNBC. So while I may not be a fan of partisan media like Fox News or MSNBC, the reason I don't talk about either one much is because they're pretty straightforward about what their perspective is and where they're coming from. They don't pretend to be objective like a CNN, which was clearly in the tank for the Clinton campaign.
Ailes eventually founded Fox News, and with it, he turned partisan hackery into an art form. Obama salutes while holding coffee.
Everyone's talking about the disrespectful way the president saluted a Marine yesterday.
So he highlights some examples of Fox being hyper-partisan and focusing on things that don't matter. And example number one is Obama saluting with a cup of coffee. Honestly, I never cared about this story when it happened, and I would really just chalk this up to a 24-hour news cycle and you just needing content to fill that format. There are a ton of segments about Donald Trump that don't need to exist, and they only exist to stir up outrage and fill airtime. A quick example of that is when Melania Trump, I believe, was recovering from a kidney surgery or some kind of illness, and she wasn't seen publicly for like 15 days. And all of the media were speculating that Donald Trump was locking her away in the White House. Clearly a story made up out of nothing in order to gin up outrage over nothing. At least Obama actually did salute with the coffee cup, however inoffensive that actually is.
Clinton coughs during a campaign event.
We all have our coughing spells, but it doesn't look good when you have all these conspiracy theories about her health.
Right.
The next thing they brought up is Hillary Clinton's coughing fits during the 2016 presidential election. And honestly, I don't get why this was so outrageous. Speculation about candidates' health has been the norm throughout many presidential elections. It happened to John McCain. It happened to Donald Trump. In fact, it's still happening to Donald Trump. People still make the claim that Donald Trump has dementia, despite the fact that he took a test under a doctor's supervision that proved that he didn't have dementia. So talking about Hillary Clinton coughing over and over again, and this weird moment where she looked like she had a seizure standing up, and her falling down at the 9/11 memorial seems completely fair game and in no way, shape, or form outside the norm.
Rashida Tlaib says a naughty word about Trump.
We're gonna go in there, we're gonna impeach the motherfucker.
Is this what the Democratic Party has become?
Buckle up,
This
folks.
is the new Democratic Party.
This is the Democratic Party in 2019.
And the third example that they bring up as a supposed non-controversy is Rashida Tlaib talking about when she's going to get into the House of Representatives, how she's going to go for impeachment of Donald Trump. I don't care about Rashida Tlaib saying a bad word either, but it is newsworthy that these new batch of candidates that are coming into office are coming in with the mentality that they're going to impeach Trump no matter what. Knowing this and covering this now informs us later when they try to impeach Trump without evidence. Because if we ever get to the point of impeachment, one of the arguments against impeachment will be that the Democrats decided that they were going to impeach Trump before any impeachable offenses were proved. So there are three examples that are supposed to show how Fox is all about ginning up outrage and conspiracy theories. Only one of them is an example of them ginning up outrage.
I know what you're thinking.
Oh my god, who cares? It's Fox. None of us actually watch that crap.
Except you do watch that crap, Mary. You just don't realize it.
Mary.
See what I mean about the comedy in this? You know, that was supposed to be funny because he said Mary to himself. And Mary's not his name. I don't know if you know that. Isn't that hilarious? He said Mary. And then himself on a Skype call for some reason, even though they have a studio, he was on a Skype call, was like, Mary? Get it? Because that's not his name. It's comedy. Really makes this video a joy to watch. And it totally doesn't amplify how horrible it is.
Because once Fox News goes all in on a story, other networks pay attention.
Political journalists are very sensitive to complaints about liberal bias. And so one thing they do is they overcompensate by paying a lot of attention to what's going on in conservative media. What's in conservative media? What are conservatives talking about? Let's elevate this. Let's take it seriously, even if I don't personally agree with it.
I actually think that this portion of the Vox clip does not get enough attention. So here you have a guy who claims to be the expert on the media, talking about how people in the media are very sensitive to being called biased against conservatives. So if conservatives bring up a story over and over again, these people in the media will report on the story, even though they don't personally agree with it, which some people would call, including myself, journalism.
Elevate this. Let's take it seriously, even if I don't personally agree with it.
Am I the only one who sees the wild and ridiculous contradictions in this video? You're talking about how Fox pushes an agenda over what's actually news, and you're talking about journalists covering stories that they may not personally agree with on a political level as if it's a bad thing. The point of journalism is to set aside your preconceived notions and go after the facts. In my book, when you're willing to give a fair hearing to beliefs that don't align with your personal beliefs, that's something to be commended. But in Vox's book, that should be condemned because the primary role of journalism for them is to gatekeep and suppress stories that they don't agree with.
Take Benghazi, for example. I'm still mad about this. In 2012, Fox began peddling wild conspiracy theories about a terror attack in Benghazi.
Explosive new details about a possible White House cover-up on Benghazi.
Unanswered questions about Benghazi.
Questions still remain unanswered.
Some have suggested this is bigger than Watergate.
Now he goes into Benghazi, and yes, it is true that Fox put a lot of emphasis on the Benghazi story. However, in their defense, it was a story that did involve a terrorist attack that killed 4 Americans, and it was in a country where the Obama administration overthrew the government for no real good reason. Furthermore, this attack also happened in the lead up to the 2012 presidential election, and initially the Obama administration were claiming that the attack wasn't a pre-planned attack on the anniversary of 9/11, but it was in fact a spontaneous thing that happened that came out of a protest over a YouTube video that barely anybody saw.
Aren't there still legitimate questions to be answered on Benghazi?
Very serious, unanswered questions.
Legitimate questions.
Too many questions.
It's not just for Fox News anymore. It's all of cable news.
So there's a special bit of irony in that you hear Rachel Maddow's voice critiquing the mainstream media for covering the Benghazi story. Rachel Maddow, who pushed Russiagate over and over again for 3 years on her show without any evidence that the Trump administration colluded with Russia, is criticizing the media for picking up on a story where there was actually a thing that happened.
Russia hates Russia, Putin, Russia, Moscow. It's not just for Fox News anymore. It's all of cable news.
This controversy is playing out among Democrats.
The hack gap is a nightmare in a normal year, but it's especially bad during election season. In 2016, a lot of journalists realized that the Clinton email server was not the national crisis Fox was making it out to be.
Could this new development put her behind bars?
You've got destruction of evidence. You've got obstruction of justice.
There's 3 specific laws that we found.
There's at least 7 that I've found.
Lock her up.
Yes, lock her up.
Oh, that pleases me.
But because Fox viewers became fixated on Hillary's emails, the story became newsworthy.
Now, Vox moves on to argue that Fox News election coverage is far, far worse than their day-to-day coverage in non-election cycles. In my opinion, most partisan news media gets a lot worse when there's a presidential election, so I don't disagree with them there. But the example they give is the Hillary Clinton email scandal, which they downplay as a mistake.
Years later, when it turns out that the Trump White House is also using unsecured communication lines, it doesn't spark the same months-long crisis that Hillary's emails did. It's not that there's nothing to these stories. Clinton's email server was a mistake. Benghazi was a mess.
Vox then follows it up by pointing out that people in the Trump administration are upset with Donald Trump taking calls on his cell phone rather than his landline because cell phones are not secured in the same way that the White House landline is. Now, should Trump be using his cell phone over his landline? Absolutely not. Is this a horrific example of a false equivalency? 100%. So let me just run through this right quick. When you are a government official, you are required to use a government email address. Now, there have been a number of people on both sides of the aisle who have violated this requirement. People in government have been caught using AOL email addresses, using Gmail email addresses, and while that's not something you're supposed to do, that's not exactly what we're talking about for Hillary Clinton. The issue with Hillary Clinton is that while she was at the State Department, she had a company come into her home and build a private server to contain all of her emails in one of her bathrooms. Now, you're required to use a government email for multiple reasons. One of them is security reasons. Presumably, the government servers are more secure and less vulnerable to hacking, so if you're sharing sensitive information, it is more protected if you use your government email account. The second reason you're required to use a government email is for transparency. Now, I know it doesn't always feel like this, but people in government are supposed to work for us, so we are entitled to see those emails after a certain period of time for the sake of public record. Now, if you use a private email account, those emails are still stored on a server that the American people can get access to later. But the purpose of secretly having a server built in your home is that you can destroy the evidence and deny the American people their right to oversee what you're doing. That's what Hillary Clinton did, and that's what makes what she did different from other stories you might hear about private email addresses. She also had the server destroyed when she was subpoenaed to turn it over to the government for review. So unlike other Democratic and Republican officials who have used private email accounts, Hillary Clinton deliberately took actions to subvert future disclosure laws while she was working for the State Department. She then deleted thousands of emails and destroyed the private server after she was required to turn it over via subpoena. Now look, the reason I'm making this video is not to praise Fox News or even defend Fox News. You can make legitimate criticisms of Fox as a news network. I'm making this because it's important to point out that the left-wing media has moved past criticizing the right and the right-wing media. What they want is to be able to deny their political opponents access to the marketplace of ideas. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think about this Vox video in the comments down below. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me on PayPal with one-time donations or monthly through Subscribestar or Patreon. This has been me taking down Vox's video on Fox News. Till next time.